Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement in the hobby. I'm your host, Alex Efron, founder of Collectors MD, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. We have Doc Schwartz, who is the creator of ediSportscards. Doc is an educator, a government veteran, and one of the hobby's clearest voices on honesty, addiction, and accountability. You may have seen his video, What Happens When Your Collecting Turns Into an Addiction, a conversation that we had last month that struck the hearts of a handful of individuals in the hobby community. This episode of the Collector's Compass is about the blurred line between collecting and gambling, the bigger cultural forces driving things like overspending, and the urgent need for community-driven solutions. If the dopamine hit of what's next is running your hobby, this conversation's for you. Doc, welcome to the show, man.
It's good to be here, Alex.
It's good to have you. And like we spoke about earlier briefly, just very grateful to have had the opportunity to join your show to talk about some very important things that are going on in the hobby today, along with the work that we're doing at Collectors MD to combat some of these issues. And today, we're going to take a deep dive into some of these deeper issues. So our first segment, I want to cover a little bit about your background and your perspective. And so, Doc, you've been in the hobby for a long time, I believe decades, with a background in both government and education, which I think is very unique. Just given, your perspective, your ability to bring some of these things from your background, from your fields into this landscape of the hobby environment. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of these issues and why they've become kind of personal for you. So the first question I have as we dive in here is, how did your experience in the government, along with podcasting, influence the way you approach advocacy in the hobby?
That's actually a really good question, and I think that hopefully your viewers kind of hear. I'm not going to give a good answer. I'm just going to give what reality is. And so what people don't understand is actually how our government works and like what our elected officials actually do. And also, and maybe this will be helpful, what the power that people actually have and how you can influence what happens in the world. So our government officials and our government is actually in a bubble. And I know that we hear that word all the time, but it's really real. I worked for the state of New Jersey for, I would say, approximately 3 to 4 years. I worked in the State House in Trenton. So like I was in the building. And when you work in government, you are insulated. You do not really speak to regular people. I came into government, I was in my late 20s. So I'd already been like in other jobs and I had been, in society. Like I was a reporter for the Star Ledger. I was also a reporter on radio in New York. And so from that perspective, when you're a journalist, you have to talk to people. Like you have to go out, you have to interview people, you have to engage. That's not how government works. Government doesn't engage at all. It's sort of there and people have to go to it in order for the government to know what's going on. Otherwise, the government is oblivious to everything that's going on in society. And it's weird when you're from the outside because you're like, how could that be? But when you're on the inside, you are literally in an insulated bubble. So maybe that gives people a perspective of, well, why doesn't the government do this or that? It's because they really don't know what's going on. They're completely oblivious.
Gotcha. So obviously you have experience, a lot of experience across a number of different fields, between being a journalist, being in the government, an educator. You got into podcasting. So I'm going to go back to my original question and totally understand that you want to sort of paint the picture of your experience in the government, how the government works from that angle, and that all makes sense. But I'm curious, has any of that experience tailored maybe your approach in the hobby?
Absolutely. So yeah, and I appreciate you asking that follow-up. So based on everything that I just said, that actually is why I do what I do, because
Got it. Okay.
you, everybody in the hobby, we all have to take responsibility, because no one else is going to do anything for us. So it's up to
Got it.
us collectively to decide what type of, well, in sports card, what kind of hobby community do we want? Do we want a community that is compassionate, that cares about each other, or do we want a toxic community? And we did talk about this off air, but I think it's important here is that there's a lot of conversation from at least the influencers about positivity in the hobby, and we've seen plenty of the big name influencers talk about positive vibes and gatekeepers and all that, but that's actually not the problem. The problem is that the hobby has become very separated. People are not connecting, and we're not building relationships. And when you build relationships, that means that you actually have to care about the person that you're talking to. And when you care, when you have compassion, that's when what you are doing makes a lot of sense, because you go, oh, I don't want people to get into trouble. Right. And that's where I come from. I think, and I love the message that you have with Collectors MD. It's not about ruining the hobby or getting people out of the hobby. It's about making the hobby fun and trying to avoid some of these real life problems that can happen when you overspend, or when you start to deprioritize real priorities in order to chase after cards. Right. Because there is a place for the hobby. Like I did a whole video, it's the 7 principles of collecting, to try to help parents teach kids how to collect, because collecting is a good thing. Like there's a lot of really good lessons you can learn from collecting. The problem is that you can't do that divorced from the compassion, the relationships, and the community. It has to be together. And if it's together, then this is a lifelong thing. Like, yeah, as you said, I've been in this hobby since the 80s. So it's 40 years. And there are things that have changed, but there's also some things that have never changed. So when you see things over decades, you go, oh yeah, that's new. And then some things have been around for a very long time. And one of those things, which I'm glad that you're doing this, has been addiction. Addiction has been around for a very long time in the hobby. But because it's a fringe, like this is a fringe community, it's not that big. Even though Fanatics wants to 10x the hobby, it's still a fringe community. And because of that, the awareness is just not there. So what you're doing is so important and so vital, because of the fact that you can actually get involved, you can talk to people, you can listen. And, I did join one of your sessions, I think it was either last week or 2 weeks ago. And I just listened. I sat in the session. I didn't say anything. I just listened, because I don't have addiction problems. But listening to the stories of people who have gone through, I was just it was heartbreaking. It was, wow, this is a much more serious problem than I even realized, even though I know addiction is a serious problem.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you drawing the parallel there. That's really helpful. And of course, thank you so much for your continued support and advocacy around what we're doing with Collectors MD. That's so important. A few things. We're going to dive into sort of your experience into joining that peer support meeting in a little bit. So I want to table that conversation for a little bit later in the show. I also have linked here the video that you referenced. And I believe that is actually, this might not be it. No, this is it. The 7 Principles of Collecting, correct?
Correct.
Titled Collect Sports Cards Like a Pro and Stop Throwing Away Your Money, right? Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
for those listening on YouTube, I've had this link up here for the last couple minutes. I don't think you can actually directly click on it, but if you'd like, you can either search EDI Sports Card 7 Principles of Collecting in YouTube, or just manually type out this URL into your browser, and you'll be able to see that video where Doc goes into detail around these principles. It's about a 20-minute video, and I think you guys will find a lot of value in that. So I just want to take a step back here and just kind of unpack some of what you just said. And for those listening, I think that what Doc was saying as it pertains to drawing that line between his experience in the government and how he's approaching the hobby. I think, you mentioned that working in government really keeps you insulated, right? So things don't necessarily naturally flow outward. You don't just stumble onto what's happening, right? So if you want to know something, you have to go actively get it. Otherwise, you're completely oblivious. And so that's interesting because there are truly a lot of similarities there as it pertains to the collector's point of view, the collector's perspective in the hobby space. So as collectors, we can't just sit back and assume that somebody's going to come in and fix the problems, right? Whether that's the break culture and, as that ties to overspending, the predatory practices that we're seeing across all of these major platforms that we talk about, the lack of guardrails. Nobody's going to step in and do those things for us. We have to take responsibility. We have to ask the hard questions, and we have to engage if we want to change the culture. So just like in journalism, you don't just wait for the truth to land in your lap. You have to go out, you have to talk to people, and you have to connect the dots yourself. Because if you don't, nothing's going to change. And so again, the same truth applies here. The only way that we can build a healthier, more sustainable hobby is if we collectively, not just me, not just you, Doc, but the entire community of those that are supporting positive change in the hobby, along with Collectors MD, we as a community have to take ownership and figure it out together. So with that being said, why did you start speaking about, so openly about overspending and addiction? And this is something that, you mentioned you've discussed in the past. You mentioned that Sports Card Dad on YouTube had brought it up, and you acknowledged some of the information and, perspective that he shared. Then you came across the video, of course, that I did with Jeff Wilson. You reached out. We got to know each other. I joined your show, but you were already having these conversations well before you knew who I was or knew anything about what Collectors MD was doing in the space. So I'm curious, what prompted you to start having this conversation?
I think that the only honest answer is that it's just my personality. I think that's probably why I got into the things that I get into. I spent 25 years in the educational system. Both my parents were educators. My father was a professor as well as a psychologist. My mom was a special ed teacher for 30 years. I started as a teaching assistant and worked my way up through the system as a principal and then a superintendent. When you have that mindset that, you are trying to do something for others, and, educators, teachers, principals, anybody that works in the school system is supposed to have this concept called a cause beyond oneself. That's actually Carl Glickman's philosophy. He was an educational researcher. And so when you believe in something bigger than you, addiction is something you have to be concerned about. For in my own professional experience, addiction is a symptom of root problems, mainly, mental illness and other things. So some people who have addiction, it's really a coping mechanism for other things. And unfortunately, because mental health awareness and our healthcare system doesn't really work in this country, people are not connected to, so that's why I spend, that's why I have compulsive shopping. That's why I might, even hoarding, so I think, we talked about that too. So
Yeah.
I'm the son of a hoarder. And so I also deal with those things, and I'm trying to figure out better ways to get rid of stuff.
Right.
And my journey, and I talked about this with you on the other episode, is that I accumulated 8 million cards by the time I was 18 years old.
It's unbelievable. And this is, likely during like the junk wax era, right? When like cards were just abundant.
Well, yeah. So I started, my first pack was in 83. The first big card that I pulled was a Wade Boggs rookie.
Right.
But being from New York, Wade Boggs, I was not happy with that.
Right.
Everybody wanted the Don Mattingly rookie. That was the card in 84.
Yep.
And that was it. And that got me into the hobby. Now, my
Cool.
father was a hoarder, so he also had shopping compulsion. So he just would buy a lot of packs, and and then he started buying boxes, and then he started buying cases, and he didn't have any interest in doing sorting, organizing, like whatever this is. He just sort of dumped that on me. And so I became a dealer at the age of basically 14. He started signing us up to go to shows. And so I did a show almost every single weekend from, the age of 13 to 18. So from 8th grade through high school, I was a dealer. And there were other kids that tried to be dealers, but they didn't have the father kind of that level support, which I find I'm sort of concerned about Jeff Wilson's kids. He had you on, and I don't think he fully understands what he's doing to his own children.
Yeah.
And I think that he seems like a good person. Like he can't be a bad guy if he brought you on. So I'm trying to understand him from the outside. So clearly he understands that something's wrong and that he wants to do the right thing, but he just doesn't have the background in understanding what's going on. And so he makes very common mistakes. And unfortunately, I think he's setting his kid, again, his kid seems like a really nice kid. He's like a typical, suburban sheltered kid. He's a teenager.
Yeah.
But these things have real long-term effects if you're not aware of what's going on. And so that's why I think Collectors MD is so important, because if parents are aware of it,
right,
they can then, even just sitting in on one session or getting the guide that you have, which I think is a PDF, just having that as a framework, parents can then go, oh, all right, we're not doing this with our children. And just doing that could help someone for the rest of their life. And I think that's the most important message, is that information is power, and what you're doing is really giving people an education that's not there.
Right. Yeah, I want to unpack a few things that you brought up. First and foremost, being as it pertains to educating the parents. And what Doc is referencing here is our Collectors MD recovery guide, which we use as a foundation, as a cornerstone of our weekly peer support meetings. There's both an extended version, which you can consume and follow, and again use as your Bible in recovery on your own time. And then we have an abbreviated version that we use for our group. So just a little bit more simplified for clarity, reflection, and pacing, so that we can keep our group sessions within the 1 hour that we have allotted on a weekly basis. So if you'd like to check that out, the link is collectorsmd.com/recovery-guide. You can also just go to collectorsmd.com and you'll find it under resources at the top of the page. So with that, I think we just have to be a little bit careful as it pertains to maybe putting the blame on the parents or adults for not realizing what's happening with their children in this space, right? Most
Well,
of them.
Well, I want to be careful. I think what you're saying. I think what you're saying is very important. There
Right.
should be no blame
Blame,
at
yeah.
all.
Blame was the
This
wrong
is
word to use. I would
this
say
is
more
about
so like,
information and
right,
education and compassion and support.
right,
This is not a blame game.
right,
This is just, but we need awareness around maybe you don't know as much as you should. And therefore, okay, let me reach out. Let me see, what is this? What is this?
right,
I'm more coming from the perspective of concern that, and parents normally are concerned about their kids. It's just, this is a concern that you may not be aware of,
right,
but also because of Collectors MD, this isn't a major problem. Like, oh my God, I need to stress over this. No, no, no. It's just, hey, I wasn't aware. And oh, here's a resource. Let
right,
me just figure out like what this is. And then I can make a better decision for my kids. Like, oh, this is how I think this should go. And I
totally.
think that's it. It's really that simple.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you clarifying that. Definitely, we're not trying to point fingers or blame parents per se for conditioning their children, to adapt to these gambling-like mechanics and the overspending and all these things we talk about. And I do want to just take a step back to address that, the recovery guide and all of the other tools and resources that we have available aren't just for the addict. Like Doc is saying, they're also there for the parents or for the loved ones or the friends and family that want to learn more about why their children or their spouses or their siblings or parents or whatever the case may be might have these addictive tendencies to begin with. So again, those resources exist for any and everyone, even if you don't know somebody directly, just so that they're there. Their purpose is so that you can educate yourself and you can help spreading this movement with us. Because like we're talking about, this is just such an important long overdue conversation that has been needed in this space and in the broader space as well. And we'll get into that shortly for far too long. So I just want to go back to, the thought here about how parents don't necessarily realize what's happening with kids in this space, right? Because it's very normal for a child to, open a pack of cards. They've been doing it for decades. And, it shouldn't be like, a cause for concern. But the problem is that most of them, didn't necessarily grow up in a world where ripping packs was tied directly to gambling mechanics. So the average person will just see it as harmless fun, right? Just like opening cards when they were kids. But the culture has shifted. Now there are things like live breaks and odds and chases and dopamine conditioning that's built into this experience. So when parents, go and buy a pack of cards or a box of cards and let their kids watch breaks, they may not fully understand that they are actually reinforcing the same reward loops that casinos use. And it's not that they're negligent, right? They're not in the wrong. It's that the industry has evolved in this way so quickly that the conditioning isn't obvious unless you've studied it or lived it through it firsthand, or are learning about it through resources like Collectors MD. And so that's why education is so important. And I think once people, parents specifically, are more aware of these mechanics, that sports cards and TCG and collectibles in general now have a direct tie in a lot of ways to gambling, they can make more intentional choices about how their kids interact with the hobby. And to your point, we aren't saying that the hobby or collecting or that sports cards or that TCG or any of these things are necessarily inherently bad. They're actually a wonderful way to engage with something that you love, whether that's a pastime or just, connect with your family members or loved ones. That's why so many of us have beautiful memories tied to growing up with our friends and our parents and, going to the local card shop or card show with our father and, having these moments that we can cherish. Times were different then. that can still exist today. It can coexist today within this space, but the blurred lines between the gray area needs to be separated. We need to separate the concept of collecting from the concept of gambling. And
here's, and again, I think what you're saying is important. And again, for the community, for the people who are listening to this. So one of the reasons why I started a YouTube channel, and I don't consider myself an influencer at this point. I only have 2,500 subscribers. So I don't think that there are many people that are actually listening, but I am certainly a counter voice to the sports card influencers, because all of them are brand new to the hobby. And the problem being is that they don't have the level of experience that I have, which is what you just talked about. So what parents are doing, again, inadvertently, innocently, and that's actually why you can't have blame on the parents, because their understanding of the hobby is what it was back in the 80s and the 90s. The hobby has changed. So when you went to buy a wax or, just a pack or even a cello pack, there was no gambling. It was just baseball cards. It was just football cards. It was just cards. There was no gambling whatsoever. It was just about collecting, buying and collecting cards. Today, that's no longer the case.
Right.
Every single box is a lottery, which means that if you want your kids to do the lottery, you're going to buy a box.
Right.
Now, there's a way for parents to actually do this without triggering the gambling and the lottery piece. There's a way to do that. And so maybe we can get into that. Like, if a parent wants to get their kid into the hobby, especially the modern stuff, because let's face it, kids want to, collect cards of players they can watch. And the hobby's always had a modern bias, whether we want to admit that or not. I did I have a whole series, I have a playlist on sport, adventures in sports cards. It's like my, tried to produce my hoarding story. And so I have a video where I literally burn a Greg Jeffries rookie card. Yeah. Because that was, again, modern bias. Greg Jeffries was considered the greatest next Hall of Famer. He was a Mets player, and it was New York, and New York was the dominant force. And so it was like, okay, this is the next Mickey Mantle. And as we all know from history, that didn't turn out to be. Right. And I just did a video on, whether Mike Trout is a Hall of Famer if he doesn't hit 500 home runs. And this is now a conversation. So, but Mike Trout is an old player at this point. Kids today do not care about Mike Trout. They care about Shohei Ohtani, and they care about who the new players are. And so this is always the piece. So if a parent wants to buy a box for their kid, they have to actually rip it with them, and they can't get overly excited about the numbered card. They should only be excited about the player.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Team. This is about connection. This is about relationships. And the only reason that you're ripping a box to begin with is for your own nostalgia and for your own, this is what I did with my parent as a child. So if you want to create that same bond, then don't get excited about the gambling. Get excited about the player or the team or whatever you want to share with your child.
I like that.
That's the important lesson.
Yeah, there's a big difference between authentic scarcity and manufactured scarcity we see in the hobby today. And this is something we talk about at great length, right? Authentic scarcity is when something is truly limited, like a vintage card that only a handful survived in good condition. And, that's a whole story within itself. The reason why cards in good condition from the 50s, 60s, 70s are so scarce is because people actually played with them. They put them in the spokes of their bicycles. They handled them. They traded them. That's why there's a sense of authentic scarcity, right? That kind of scarcity is organic. There you go. It can't be replicated. But modern day scarcity, on the other hand, which is what you're talking about, let me just finish this thought and then I'll let you jump in. It's often engineered, right? Companies print these endless parallels, the short prints, the case hits, the one-of-ones, to create this illusion of rarity. But when every single product is filled with a chase or chases that is basically dictated by the manufacturer, the concept of scarcity itself gets diluted. So there's no true limitation. It's just layers of artificial scarcity designed to drive demand and keep people ripping. And collectors need, and parents, not just collectors, need to understand that distinction. Authentic scarcity carries lasting value because it's tied to reality, like you're talking about with the players and the moments, as opposed to manufactured scarcity, where it's all about just creating the short-term hype, but it rarely holds the same weight over time. Next week, there's going to be another release, and today's release is yesterday's news. So it's really important to distinguish between the two, and that, you know, to your point, kids aren't just solely focused on the serial number on the back of a card, and more so the player on the front of it, the moment, you know, they hit that card, who they were with, you know, all those things are just so important. So
to be quite honest, I'll put it this way, for anybody that's listening to this, and because if you so on the people that have the addiction problem, if you're trying to figure out, well, how do I do this without triggering the addiction? And the reason that I put these two cards up, okay, so these are ungraded. And I need to make this point very, very clear. These are ungraded. All right. Now I traded for this Acuna. Okay. So again, in the modern hobby, this is what people are chasing. This is what's valuable. This is a PSA 10. And so people go, but in all honesty, just get a raw one. That's it. This, you can actually do the hobby at a very cheap level if you buy raw and you buy base. And if you're just collecting, that's all you need. And the problem is that we're under so much brainwashing influence that a lot of people have been affected. And trust me, I got affected by this during COVID as well, because it was so strong. Like the amount of messaging was so strong that it's hard to think through the swamp of what is everything. And it's all artificial.
Right.
You can't have 1 million one-to-ones and say that they're scarce. There's 1 million of them. They're not scarce.
Yeah.
So you're diluting, and that's the problem. We need people who can like take a step back, slow down, breathe, and go, so this is not rare. Like this is legitimately not rare.
Right.
There's a few things that are rare in the modern hobby. And I've actually talked about this on my channel. And the problem is that those rare stuff is just, it's out of the price range of all of us.
Right.
So it's sort of like, it's like a museum piece. You don't go like, I'm never going to buy a Van Gogh. Like, so I go to a museum. And that's, I think, what we need to start doing with the hobby is just go, hopefully these mega millionaires will display their stuff so we can appreciate it, but we're never going to own it.
Yeah. I do want to get us back on track here because we're already 35 minutes in and we still have a lot to unpack. There were two anecdotes that I did want to touch on really quickly. One of them is as it pertains to yesterday's, or, you know, how the hobby existed when I was a kid or when you were a kid versus what it looks like now from a dealer's perspective, because you mentioned that you were a dealer at age 14. So from a dealer's perspective, the hobby looks nothing like it did even a decade ago. It used to be all about face-to-face relationships in a local card shop or at shows. Now you're competing with breakers, the streaming 24/7, the online marketplaces that move product instantly, and influencers just shaping demand in real time, right? So margins are much tighter, expectations are higher, the trust has become the real currency, right? So because collectors have endless options now, they'll go where they feel credibility and community are strongest. So I just wanted to add that because it's no longer a one-to-one, and that's really, really important to note. And then the other thing that you had mentioned was this idea of cause beyond oneself. And I really like the way you put that. And I think with addiction specifically, whether it's cards, gambling, alcohol, it doesn't matter. It's just so easy to get trapped in a cycle that's completely self-focused, right? You're chasing the next high, the next purchase, the next distraction. And the more isolated you are within that cycle, the harder it is to see anything outside of your own wants within that moment. But what really creates change is when people step into something much bigger than themselves, whether that's a cause beyond yourself that gives you perspective. You know, you're no longer asking, what do I do? What do I want right now? But, you know, how does this affect the people around me? How do I contribute to something larger than my own chase? And so that's why community service, accountability, all these things are so powerful in recovery, because when you're aligned with a cause beyond yourself, it shifts the focus from compulsion to connection, and from taking to giving. And I think that applies directly to collecting. If the only reason you're in it is to just rip for yourself, you're going to burn out. But if you see the hobby as a way to connect, to share, to contribute, you're going to be much more grounded, and the addiction will lose some of its grip. So, of course, it applies to collecting. It applies to recovery and support and everything we're doing. But I love that concept of the cause beyond oneself. So there were a few more things that I wanted to cover as it pertains to your background and perspective, Doc. You know, we talked a lot about honesty being non-negotiable, and I think we can actually get into that a little bit later. But you've called yourself a son of a hoarder. You have your card hoarder stand in the background there. I'm curious, from your perspective, can you describe like the nuances, the core differences between hoarding and collecting?
Yeah. So a collector is someone, and I think the word that you use a lot, it's collecting with intention. There's a purpose to why you're doing what you're doing. So, and intention doesn't mean that it makes sense to anyone else. And I want to make that clear. So you have to make decisions. And when you make decisions, that means there's intention behind it. And that's really the biggest difference. For a hoarder, or for a son of a hoarder, or for someone who has an addiction problem, they're not actually making decisions, they're reacting. They're doing something. It can become a compulsion. It's just, you're not in control. And so it's sort of like two sides of the same coin. So hoarding and addiction are definitely problems because you're not making decisions. And so one of the things that I talk about on the channel a lot is the fact that I started what's called a 300 card challenge to try to get 8 million cards down to 300. Again, if you think about it, and this is where, again, I think maybe people with addiction and obviously people with hoarding have a problem, is because when you start to think the end goal, and that's typically how people think, is we're at point A and we want to get to point Z. And the problem with people that do that with addiction or hoarding is that the path to A to Z is so overwhelming and so big that you just go, I can't do this, and you give up. And so the more important thing with anybody that's dealing with this is that you go from A to B. Then you go from B to C. You're going to get to Z. It's going to take some time, and it's okay. And once you just take that first step, that's actually the win. It's A to B, hooray. B to C, hooray. And I think that gets lost because people get overwhelmed and go, I don't know what to do. And then they get stuck. I've dealt with this. I think this is where my education background comes in, is because I've seen thousands and thousands of kids who are in school who struggle academically and they give up in class. And so I had to train professional development teachers. I've coached 5,000 teachers in my career. So I had to teach teachers, how do you get kids to stop giving up? And, again, our natural inclination is, well, we're just going to encourage them. No, that's actually not going to work. Yes, you need to encourage them, but what are you encouraging? And it's just taking that first step. You can do this, but let's just do this first. So in order for me to sell 8 million cards, you can't go from 8 million to 300 in a day. It's impossible. There's too many cards. So I had to start with, okay, what can I sell right now? And that was it. And in in the recovery, I guess if you would call it a recovery stage, the first thing was making that first sale of like, okay, I'm going to get rid of these things. And again, when you're dealing, I had 2 storage units, my entire, mom's basement, because my father passed away, my entire mom's basement was filled, including the garage, because I had hundreds of sealed cases, in addition to millions and millions of cards. It was just overwhelming. So I made that first sale, and I think I sold probably like 1,000 cards. So again, 8 million and 1,000, you're like, you didn't do anything, but I did. It was a win. And it felt good. I was like, oh, I sold 1,000 cards. This is awesome. Okay. All right. Let's go to, I did A to B. All right. What's B to C? And, I have a lot, here that I'm trying to sell. It's about, I priced it out now. It's about $6,800 worth of stuff. And so I'm trying to sell it. And again, the problem with hoarding is, and this is actually a problem in the hobby, is that when you look at a card like this, you're like, I want max value. And you can't do that. You have, I need to sell this lot, and therefore I want to get as much as I can. It's not about, I know what the actual value is. It's valued at $6,800. And it's like, okay, what's the best offer I can get? And if that's $2,500, it's $2,500. It's gone. I sold it. The win is that I sold it. It's gone, and I got something back. I got the most value I could get back. It's fine that it's worth more. It's fine. And I think that can be a problem with the addiction, is that you get yourself in a hole, and then you use gambling to try to get yourself out. Once you do that, you're in real trouble. You have to admit you're in the hole and then just stop and go, okay, I got to deal with this. Okay, now what am I going to do? And you can't use addiction to get yourself out of the hole, because you're just there's no such thing as doubling down. It's called digging a bigger grave. And that's the biggest piece.
Yeah. Thank you for expanding on that. I mean, yeah, you raised a lot of really, really great points there. I do have a lot of thoughts and, additional anecdotes that I'd love to share, but we're still on segment 1, and I do want to move us along here because we're already at 45 minutes and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to transition us over to the next segment, which is the bigger picture, addiction across collecting. So bear with me here as I switch my pages. I want to make sure that I have all the information here. Okay, so we're not just talking about sports cards with Collectors MD. I already raised that point. The same dopamine loop shows up in other areas like TCG, which obviously is also synonymous with the hobby, but also memorabilia, things like comic books, sneakers, watches, handbags. You have things like NFTs and loot boxes and gacha games and gaming. Even retail therapy can fall into this sort of overspending compulsive territory, right? So why do you think, Doc, so many verticals, whether it be cards, sneakers, coins, art even, why are there so many different categories that fall into these same compulsive cycles? And also, in addition to that, what do you think the common thread between ripping wax, things like sneaker drops and loot boxes, which I mentioned, like what are the similarities there? What are the parallels that are ultimately scratching that same itch for people? And then lastly on this subject, and I figure I'll ask all three questions and then you can, span your answer. What can collectors learn by zooming out and realizing that this is actually a part of a bigger pattern?
So there's two answers to the first question. Like, why is this across all things and what is the pattern? And so the two answers is one, I want to say mental illness. That doesn't mean like psychosis. It just means mental illness. The second piece of that is we are under tremendous amount of influence in our society. There's social media, there's the regular media, there's all of these influencers. And so what is happening is that you may not have a mental illness. Like, you may not be diagnosed with a problem, but because you're being bombarded every single minute of every single day, your brain is now actually having a problem. And so once you have a problem, then these things become a symptom. I think that, and whether people realize this or not, I personally believe, this is not backed by any psychological research, I personally believe that addiction and hoarding is a coping mechanism. I think that we're using it to try to work through whatever is happening. The problem being is that something that should be helping us is making it even worse. Right. And that's where this becomes such a big problem, because you want to stop, but you're not addressing the underlying problem as to why you're doing it in the first place. Because this is this is actually your body's going, I have to do this to soothe whatever else is going on. So you may want to stop, but your body's saying, I need to do this because something else is really wrong. And again, it goes back to, if you just can kind of, and it's not easy, but if you can stop, just like cold stop, go, okay, what am I doing? And again, I think it comes back to intention. Okay, what do I want to do? If you can just ask yourself that question, that might be the key that unlocks the door to the next piece. What do I want to do? Oh, okay, I want to get certain cards. Great. That's the answer. Write that down. I want to get certain cards. If that becomes your purpose, now you can, with intention, go, okay, wait a minute. How can I get those cards? If I'm going to use breaks, then you need to mathematically figure out, well, how much is that going to cost me? Again, intention makes you think about all of these questions. If you don't have a purpose and you don't have intention, then you're just going to do stuff, and then consequences are going to become an avalanche, right? Because you're going to be like, well, why did I do this anyway to begin with? And I think that's the biggest piece. So when I created the 300 card challenge, it was an intention. I'm not making it. I'm failing. I cannot get down to 300 cards, and I may never, because I like collecting. I like holding on to stuff. But it's not a matter of, am I going to succeed at my intention? It's, I have an intention, therefore I keep getting rid of more and more stuff.
Right.
For addiction, it's different. I don't deal with addiction, and that's why I'm so happy that you have partnered with professionals, because they understand. Like, I don't know what someone with addiction should do. I know the mindset and I understand the mental preparation, but I don't know what someone with addiction should do first, second. Like, I am not, and I don't want to speak out of turn and say that's what you should do, but I do know that you have to get control over your mind, and you need mental strength to go, you know what? I'm in control of my life. I make my own decisions. No one else has influence over me. Therefore, if you listen to social media and you listen to influencers, write down what they're saying and go, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
If you just do that, you will survive the brainwashing that we're all being bombarded with.
Right. Yeah. You bring up so many good points. Appreciate you expanding on all three of those questions. I think the biggest issue is that, to your point, mental health plays a huge role in this. And when you have things like, dopamine being essentially exploited by manufacturers through marketing and advertising, that's where things start to get dangerous, right? Because these marketers know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to get us excited about a new product release, about an athlete. And so with that paired with the chemical component of this occurring in your brain, it's a recipe for disaster. And so real quick, I just want to share yesterday's daily reflection because I think it's relevant here. Just bear with me. I touched on the chemistry behind compulsion. And so for those listening through our audio platforms, I'm just going to quickly read this because, Doc, I think you will find great value in this because we touch on a lot of things that we're talking about. So the title is The Chemistry Behind Compulsion. And I lead with, by way of disclaimer, I'm not a licensed therapist, doctor, scientist, or mental health professional. I'm simply a collector who has witnessed and lived through the struggles of compulsion and someone leading a movement that's needed attention for far too long. What follows isn't clinical advice. It's perspective shaped by experience, observation, and the voices of others walking the same path. Addiction is rarely just about the thing itself. It's not only the drink, the drug, the slot machine, or the sealed box of cards. It's the brain's response to them. Every pull of the slot lever, every pack ripped, every bid now clicked online triggers the same neurological system, dopamine release. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical, but in reality, it's more about anticipation and reward. It fuels that rush when you're about to reveal the last card in a break or when the delivery driver drops off another padded envelope at your door. What's remarkable is that gambling and ripping packs aren't substances we put into our bodies. There's no pill, no powder, no drink, and yet the effect can be just as consuming. The drug is the brain's own chemistry activated over and over by chance, anticipation, and reward. And I'm just going to add a caveat here that all of that is manufactured by the manufacturers and the platforms. That's why it makes all of this so deceptive, because there's nothing physical to point to. It's easy to dismiss or minimize the hold it can take. Here's where the science cuts even deeper. Dopamine spikes are only half the story. The other half is what happens in between. Over time, when the brain is conditioned to expect these spikes, your baseline levels begin to drop. Everyday life feels flatter. The single joys that once gave you satisfaction, time with family, a meal you love, a quiet night's rest, start to pale in comparison to the chemically charged high of what's next. And it doesn't stop there. The more you chase the rush, the harder it becomes to hit that same high again. In all forms of addiction recovery, we call this chasing the dragon. Your brain adapts, raising the threshold. That's why collectors who start with a handful of inexpensive raw singles often graduate to things like graded slabs and cases, breaks, or auctions far beyond their means. The hobby shifts from being a source of joy to being a neurological arms race, a desperate push for a peak that keeps moving out of reach. Understanding this doesn't make the pull disappear, but it does give us language to face it. Compulsion is not weakness, it's chemistry. When we name it for what it is, we take back some power. We can begin to retrain the brain, finding healthier spikes in connection, accountability, and intention instead of the endless chase. Because the truth is, the cards themselves don't hold the high, the rush does. And that's exactly why we need to step back and remember that collecting was never meant to replace living. It was meant to enrich it. Awareness is the first antidote. Naming the science helps us reclaim the story. So again, I feel like this piece really ties together a lot of what we're talking about, the nuances as it pertains to the mental health component of why people fall into these compulsive cycles, not just across the cards, but across other verticals as well. This
So
gives you more perspective. You zoom out and look at the bigger pattern. Go ahead.
There's one piece of research that I think would be helpful now that people heard that. So I'm in the process of finishing my second book, Disrupting Education: How Do We Prevent the Next School Shooter from Happening? And part of that research is in 2010, a psychologist named Dr. Philippa Lally did a study on how human beings develop routines. And what he found was that the average person takes 66 days to develop a routine. So when you combine the dopamine hit with now a new routine that you put in place for 66 days, where this is what you do, it's really hard to get out of it. And so for anybody that's watching this, that is not dealing with addiction right now, what you have to be aware of is that you want to avoid creating new routines that are going to be negative and toxic for your life.
Right.
So whatever you do, this is where the intention comes back, is whatever you do, you can do it once. That's fine. Like I did 4 breaks because I didn't know what a break was. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. What the heck's this? So I did 4 breaks. And after the 4th one, I went, well, this doesn't make any sense. Like I got 2 that were good and then 2 that were bad. And after the second one that was bad, I'm like, this is not the way to collect cards. Like I'm going to spend way too much money. And I'm like, I'm averse to losing money. So that's also why I can't be a gambler, because I don't like losing money. So like there's no dopamine chase. The losing the money hurts me way more than winning money. Like, in fact, I don't care about winning money. I just don't want to lose money. So right. Like I have I guess a wall against that, at least that addiction. But I understand that if you're going after it's the same thing with the sugar industry. Like we consume way too much sugar, which is causing so many health problems. There's diabetes, there's dementia, there's Alzheimer's. They're all linked to sugar consumption. So the best thing to do is to either limit your sugar or try to eliminate it as much as possible. Now, obviously, fruits and vegetables have sugar, but they're natural sugars. They're fine. And that's the piece, is that it's just about knowledge, awareness, intention, control. You are in control of your life, and stop giving power away to people. And if you do that, now here's the piece that hopefully, and I think this is what we're going to get to. You're not isolated. This is about community. This is about relationships. You have to bring people into your life. You can't do this. You can't suffer in silence. And from my background, that's actually the problem that I'm trying to solve, is that there are almost 4 million teachers in this country. They're all suffering in silence. And so for anybody that's out there, you're like, well, I have this big problem. What do I do? The first thing, which is, again, this is not a big deal. Just join Collectors MD. Like, it's really that simple. And just listen. Just doing that is better than suffering in silence. And it doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's huge.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, appreciate that. We invite any and everybody who's suffering in silence and isolation, who's experiencing the downfall, parts of collecting and overspending, the turmoil of emotional, mental, and financial fallout and burnout. We're here for you. That's why Collectors MD exists. So, all you have to do is just check out the links in the description of this episode, and you'll be able to find the Google form to sign up for our weekly peer support meetings, join our group chat, our Discord, check out our socials, our website. That's chock full of tools and resources. We're here for any and everybody who needs it. And the best part is that there are no strings attached. It's completely free. With that, I do want to transition over to our next segment. We're going to touch on legislation. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Legislation, regulation, and guardrails. So you've been pretty outspoken, and we talked about this on your show, that regulation in the hobby is inevitable, or at least necessary. So with your background, I'm curious what you think is, actually realistic. So why has the industry been able to avoid regulation so far? If you were writing policy tomorrow, what's the first safeguard you'd implement? Things like age limits, disclosures, odds, etc. And how can we balance collector freedom with consumer protections?
So let me answer the first question, which is why has the hobby not been regulated? It's just not, it's never been very big. It'd be like regulating flea markets, nobody, like swap meets, nobody cares. Like, it's such a fringe of a fringe, but that's no longer the
That's
case.
no longer the case. I mean, it's
When you,
a multi-billion-dollar industry now.
yeah, multi-billion, and it's getting even bigger. When you have people like Tom Brady opening up card shops across the country, you now have you have eyeballs on this hobby. And
Yep.
eventually, again, like I said, so the government's in a bubble. They don't know what's going on. But if you attract attention, the government goes, "Oh, what's going on over there?" And like, I don't think Michael Rubin and Fanatics totally understand what they're doing. I think they're totally focused on just making money, which is what they should do. It's a business. But I don't think they realize that getting this many eyeballs on this industry is actually going to force the government to actually make regulation. And if I were to say the only regulation that should be done, and I think that the government would even bother with, because to be honest, regulating the sports card industry is sort of it's stupid. No politician is going to put their neck out to regulate the sports card industry.
And that's because they look at it like a childhood game, right?
Well, that's the peak. But see, that's actually where they're going to regulate. If the hobby wants to continue to do wax the way it does, you're going to have to actually show ID to buy a box. It's going to become like cigarettes because it's gambling, and you can't gamble under 21. So kids will no longer be allowed to buy boxes, and I think
any box, not even like retail or,
they're all lotteries.
Yeah. Which is a sad thing.
The only way to fix it, and I've said this on my channel, but again, I'm not an influencer. The only way to fix it is the hobby has to go back to base and then lottery. Series 1 and Series 2 needs to just go back to the old way of it's just cards. It's just base. There's nothing else in there. There's inserts. Maybe there's some short prints, but there's no more number. There's no more patches. There's no more autographs. It's just cards.
We were past the point of no return as it pertains to that. I think
not if it gets regulated.
Yeah, but they would lose interest of thousands, tens of thousands of customers, probably millions, because so many people join the hobby because of the lure there. Also, if you were to start changing the format now, people would just revert back to old product. They would start ripping, last year's set or the year before. And, of course, those products would become more and more scarce over time. But between Panini, Topps, even some of the smaller manufacturers like Leaf and Upper Deck, it's crazy to say that Upper Deck's a small manufacturer, but in the grand scheme of things, they've mass produced so much product.
Last year.
What's that?
Topps made $2 billion last year.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Anyway,
whereas Upper Deck, I think, is like $500,000.
Yeah, the point I'm making here is
they didn't make any money.
The damage is done, and I don't think these companies have any intention of reconfiguring the formatting. If anything, it's only just going to become more and more oversaturated, and these sets are going to have more and more parallels. I mean, we're already seeing it with Prism and Topps Chrome. They come up with new ideas for parallels and refractors and short prints. And to your point from before, they're an abundance of one of one. So what really is a one of one? So with that, with regulation, I don't know if the idea or the thought will be, let's just, have these manufacturers revert back to how they produced the products back in the 80s and 90s, where there were no serial numbered cards and the focus was just base. I don't see that happening, but I definitely agree with you as it pertains to everything else that you discussed regarding regulation. Was there anything else there that you wanted to touch on, specifically as it pertains to, like, if you were to write policy tomorrow, what's the first safeguard you'd implement? I'm assuming it would be age gates, right?
Well, the only problem that society has with sports cards is the gambling aspect. Gambling is illegal for children for a good reason, and this is now a legal way for children to gamble.
Right.
So, and I'm going to tell you right now, knowing politicians the way that I do, the minute they understand that sports cards is targeting kids for gambling, they're going to lose their minds.
Yeah.
And they will come after the sports card industry. Like, again, people see, these congressional hearings. Like, if you want to see Congress get pissed, they will get pissed that these, again, monsters are targeting your children.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah. It's interesting that, on one hand, Fanatics has become so global that the likes of Tom Brady and Olivia Dunn and Paul Skeens and, all of these A-list celebrities and athletes are involved. Yet there's still circus games going on, right? I mean, Whatnot just announced that they're regulating repacks, but like, that's such a small step in a much bigger conversation. So we'll see. I mean, time will tell. Obviously,
well, again, government regulation will only happen. I'll put it this way: government regulation will only happen unless communities like yours get big enough where there can be advocacy.
Right.
Again, like, I know how to talk to elected officials and I know how to write legislation. Or what's going to happen is, because this is getting bigger, because the hobby is growing, what's going to happen is you're going to get a politician whose child becomes addicted to sports cards and ruins their life. And therefore, the politician goes, what the hell happened? And now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because when it hits home, that's when you get legislation.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And all we can do is just continue spreading the message. And that's what we're focused on. I mentioned this in the last episode. We're not necessarily focused on the legislation and the government policies that need to be implemented. We're more focused on the now, the issues that we're seeing, the addiction, the compulsive behavior, how we can better the hobby as it stands today within the boundaries that we're within. So we'll continue to do what we can. We'll do our part. We'll continue to partner with the right folks and make sure that the right influencers and creators within this space are partnering with us and advocating, the way you are, Doc, the way even Jeff Wilson and
actually what
a few other folks that we brought into the fold.
Here's actually what I would say. The most important thing for Collectors MD right now, and for anybody that wants to make the hobby better, is just making sure that everybody knows that Collectors MD is there.
Yeah.
The awareness right now is the most important thing. Like, I thought, again, I don't know exactly what Jeff is doing with Cards HQ with the announcement, but every single break should have hey, if you think you have a problem, you should sign up for Collectors MD. That right now is literally the most important thing, because at least there's a support. Without the support, it's just the wild, wild west, which is a huge, it's a bigger problem. So Collectors MD is not about solving the issue. It's about making sure that people, one, have intention, and two, if they feel like they're getting into trouble, there's a place to go. Without it, it's a huge problem. And so, like, the legislation is, and I don't, again, I'll just put it this way. I would put a 99% chance that there's never going to be regulation on the sports card industry. It's probably never going to happen. So anybody that's thinking, oh, the government, that's just not the way the government works.
Yeah.
They're never probably going to regulate this industry. So that means that we have to be like a little bit more realistic.
Right.
That's why Collectors MD is important, because without it, then we have nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about being proactive and doing everything within our power, not the government or anybody else, to do the right thing. And that's what we're trying to do with Collectors MD, is proactively helping other people overcome addiction, overcome a lot of the things that I personally myself have suffered through. I like to say that I created Collectors MD because I want there to be a support system in place, something that I wished existed when I was in the thick of things. So with that, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is the human side, shame, secrecy, recovery, etc. So, Doc, you joined one of our Collectors MD peer support meetings. We talked about that briefly. I think it was a couple weeks ago. What specifically struck you hearing real people share real stories?
I think let me kind of paint this picture for people who have never joined a session. They don't know what Collectors MD is, and sort of like, what is all of this? So my understanding of card addiction was just sort of like, you just spend too much money and you go into debt, and it's like, oh, it's it's just like what most people do in society. Like, everybody has credit card debt, like everybody's in debt. So what's the big deal about card addiction? Like, it's just another one of those things. And what I didn't understand when I went into the session was that I didn't understand how dark a hole this really is. I had no idea. And what I was listening to is, one, the shame, like, I'm doing this, I know it's bad, and because I know it's bad, I can't let anyone else know what's going on. And that actually is like the biggest problem, because isolating yourself and separating yourself just makes things worse.
Right.
And so and I could hear in the voices of the people sharing that sharing it was actually lifting the weight off of their shoulders, which was like, I didn't expect that either. That's amazing. Okay, wait a minute. This has much more bigger implications. And I think to what you had said is that this isn't just about the person dealing with the addiction. It's also for all the loved ones and the family members and the friends that see the person that they care about going through all of this. How do I help them? How do I make sure that they don't feel so alone? Because like this is step one in a very dark path. Like, it can get so much worse. And so, again, my background dealing with kids in crisis and kids with, suicidal ideation and all of like, especially if we have kids that are going to now deal with the gambling addiction, they don't have the wherewithal to maybe even reach out and say, hey, I think I have a problem. Like, you have to identify the signs and go, I think my kid has a problem. And this hobby is targeting teenagers. So parents need to be aware, if my kid is on Whatnot, eBay, Fanatics Live every single day, that's a problem. Like I said, takes 66 days to create a routine. So parents need to make sure that you're limiting. So it's fine if they want to do a break, but maybe you should put this in terms of a reward. Like, look, you can do a break if you get good grades, which means that's only 4 times a year. There's only 4 marking periods. So they have to wait. There's also this piece of, again, from the dopamine hit and the psychology, there's this instant gratification problem that's also being triggered by the hobby. So if you can delay gratification, so you can have your kid do it, that's fine, but delay it. If you can delay it, you will help them not get into addictive patterns and behavior, And that's also extremely helpful.
Yeah, well said. In addition to that, like, why do you think hearing somebody else's story sort of change the way that you think about things, as it pertains to addiction? And you already sort of answered my next question, which is how can families and friends play a role in reducing secrecy and shame? But anything else that you want to expand on that?
I would just say that being able to listen to someone be honest, and I think that was the biggest piece. I didn't realize what the reality was, and everybody that joined the session was very honest. And when you listen to honesty, that's so much different than what we're used to. Like, in today's society, everyone is a grifter, everyone's lying, everyone has a game. And in this session, it was actual honesty. It was sincere. This is what it is. This is what I'm dealing with. And these are the problems. And it's like, when you deal with honest people, you can actually like let go of your guard and go, I have compassion for this other person. And I think that's important for people, especially today. Like, even if you don't have addiction, even if you don't know anyone with addiction, it's probably a good idea to just do one session, because you need to get back in touch with that human beings are actually people. We're not all influencers. We're not all trying to get something over on you. And I think we've lost that human touch of, oh, this is a human being going through a problem, and I don't have the solution for it, but just listening is compassionate in going, oh, okay. And so you can even reflect on your own life and go, wow, I'm grateful that I don't have this issue. And I hope that person, I'm glad that they have this, because this is really helpful for them. And it's like, okay, what could I do? Well, the only thing that I can do is just let people know that Collectors MD exists. I cannot help the problem. I cannot solve it for anybody. I can't I can't do anything other than, the only thing I can do is just let people know that Collectors MD exists and hope for the best.
Yeah, agreed. Again, thank you so much for the continued support. This actually is a good segue to our next segment, which is these two lanes of recovery. We have abstinence and intention, right? And we've talked about this a little bit. When people realize their collecting has slipped into compulsion, the path tends to split into, again, these two lanes, abstinence or intention. We say that both are valid, and the choice really depends on what brings someone the most peace. So just to define abstinence means stepping away entirely. For some, the triggers are so strong that the healthiest choice is to stop buying, ripping, or engaging with the hobby altogether. And it's not about punishment. It's about removing the source of the spiral so they can regain stability and heal. And, you think of it like sobriety and substance recovery, right? A clean break from the cycle. No weaning off, no once in a while, you're completely cut off cold turkey. On the other hand, intention means continuing to collect, but with clear boundaries and structure. That might look like setting a written budget, avoiding late night buying, saying no to breaks altogether, or once in a while, or sticking only to personal collection lists. This is all about staying connected to the hobby while replacing impulse with discipline, so collecting feels joyful instead of destructive. Both lanes have the same destination, right? It's all about control, balance, and peace of mind. One lane closes the door completely. The other keeps it open but guarded. Neither is necessarily the better option. And again, both are valid. What matters is honesty about which lane keeps you safe, grounded, and aligned with the life you want to build. And so this is an area that we focus on quite a bit because, again, in other realms of addiction, alcohol, substance, gambling, abstinence is the key. That is what is implemented from day one. You walk into a GA room, they say self-exclude from the apps. Prevent yourself from being able to engage in the actual behavior. We don't necessarily see the sports card hobby in the same light because, again, like I was alluding to earlier, it can coexist with the gambling side of it. You just have to create the barrier, right? So if you still want to collect with intention, we support that. We're here for you, and we can provide you with the tools and resources necessary in order to equip you with the the opportunity to do so. So I'm curious from your perspective, Doc, within the abstinence lane, what does stepping away fully look like in practice to you, as opposed to the intention lane, where you're basically sticking to rules that work, things like budgets and staying away from breaks and no late night buying or auctions, focusing on your PC or specific filters for your PC, maybe even implementing some of the things that we talk about, guardrails like cool off periods or deposit limits, which don't currently exist. But again, we're advocating with companies like Gamban to implement. I'm curious, how do you see sort of the parallels there and like what they each look like in practice?
Sure. And I think you brought up a really great point. So for one, I'm not a psychologist, so anything that I say is just my opinion. Personally, I think that anybody that gets into trouble or thinks they're getting into trouble, I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think you should absolutely do abstinence for a certain period of time, because what's happened is you've gotten into a pattern and you need to change the pattern. And so you can't regulate the pattern. You have to change it. So you have to get rid of the triggers. You have to get rid of that, like the cycle, the mental cycle. And then for some people, and I certainly hope that, because again, the purpose of Collectors MD is to make the hobby fun, not to get rid of it, but to how do you do this with fun and intention and like, yes, I like doing this. And I love that. I love the hobby and I like collecting. So I certainly hope that people can do this with intention. But I think that everyone has to have like a certain time frame where I personally, I stop and leave the hobby for a certain amount of time. Like there is definitely, I step away for maybe like 3 weeks and I don't do anything with the hobby, because you don't want to get into patterns that you're not in control of. So again, just think about this 66-day piece. If you just have that in the top of your mind, like I shouldn't be doing anything that I don't want to be doing for 66 days in a row. Like that's just bad. Unless it's something that you're like, oh, I have to do, like, so brushing your teeth, you should do 66 days in a row. Like eating breakfast, you should do that. Going to work, you should do that. Those are things you should do every single day. But collecting, you shouldn't do 66 days in a row. That's an obsession. And so that's the biggest difference, is realizing this as a hobby. So everybody should have like time allotted to it. And I think that's also the other piece, is people don't have time allotted to it. It's sort of like, I do it whenever I have free time. It's like, that's probably a bad idea. So designate time, figure out like, okay, so if you know there's a card show on a specific day, like, yes, you're going to plan to go to that show. And then, okay, do you want like, Monday morning quarterback time to see what you got and whatever. And then that's it. Put it down. Don't come back to it till the next time you're supposed to do it. And if you do it that way, that's got intention behind it. And it's also got control and, like you said, boundaries. But everybody's got to do things the way they want to do them. There's no one right way to collect. Everybody's got to collect in the way that makes them happy. For me, there's a lot of times where I'm like, because there are cards that I would like in my PC, but again, I'm averse to spending money. So, like I'm trying to figure out, how do I get the cards with the stuff that I have? And again, I have too much stuff. So it's like, okay, so that's why I went on Veriswap and I'm like, I'm going to trade stuff. I haven't made a trade because, again, it's difficult when there's not enough people on these apps. Like if eBay had a trading option, I could probably trade everything, but they don't. So that's the other piece, is you have to figure out where you get into the hobby and where you get out. If there's one last piece that I would say that might be helpful to people, is that you have to try to sell your cards. If too many people are, and this is, I think, getting into the hoarding piece. I think there's way more hoarders out there than people want to admit. There are people, all of these people that get into breaks and all of this addiction, you have too many cards because you're getting a bunch of junk, and you know that, and you have nothing to do with, like, what do you do with it all? And I think if people actually try to sell their cards, you start realizing, I'm probably wasting a lot of money here. I think there's a disconnect between, oh, this is what it's worth. Are you really? That's what it's worth? Like, what is this card actually worth? Try to sell it. Then you know, oh, people don't want to pay what you think it's worth. And that's the problem, is that we have this unrealized number in our head and go, oh, and I'm starting to do, like there's a couple videos coming out. So I've been working with Mind Cycle Cards to do an update to the Jeff Wilson, the Sports Collector Index, all the cards that he bought. He already lost $1 million in value, again, unrealized value, because he thought the cards were worth something, but they weren't. Like, he spent $500,000 on a Michael Jordan rookie. It's only worth $190,000. That's a lot of money to lose. The piece of it, so then there's another piece of, so Ken Kendricks, who's the managing partner of the Arizona Diamondbacks, he has the world's largest or most valuable sports card collection in the world, and he has a Mickey Mantle 52 PSA 10. Now, he would like it to be worth between $30 to $40 million, but based on the last sale, so the 9.5 SGC Mickey Mantle, which went for $12.6 million, and the dual logo man MJ Kobe that just went for $12.9 million, that Mickey Mantle is not worth $30 million. And anybody that knows anything about economics, numbers, or value knows that. Now, the insurance company doesn't want to say it's worth less because they want the premium on a $30 million card. So they're going to charge him for $30 million, but it's not worth $30 million. And that's the piece, is you have to sell in order to know what the market value is.
Yeah.
And if you don't sell, you can make up any number you want in your head and go, my collection is worth $100,000. I actually did a video where I tried to figure out how much my collection, again, most of it, because I have too many cards, but like what the core is at this point, what's it actually worth? And it came down to about $25,000 is what my core collection is actually worth. I could have made up a number. Oh, it's $50,000. It's $100,000. No, I actually comped it all out, and it came to $25,000.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. It's important to, make sure that you're using the right tools and resources when you're tracking comps. Of course, things that are more scarce, one-of-ones, older cards that, have low pop grades. Those things might be a little bit more difficult. And, they say that a card is only worth what somebody is willing to pay. So with a card like, the Mickey Mantle you mentioned, it's very, very difficult to put, a concrete number on something like that. But for regular collectors, or for, the average collector, you can absolutely use tools and resources like Card Ladder, who we recently signed an affiliate deal with, to check out recent comps and see what your cards are trading for. If you are collecting with intention, I think that's a very valuable tool that you can use for that. Awesome. So one last question as it pertains to, the two lanes of recovery, abstinence versus intention. How does community change sort of the outcomes? Like, for instance, for our meetings, you sat in on the meeting, but you had your camera off. Now, you have the experience of understanding, listening to these real raw stories. How do you think that, like, you taking that to your community, sharing that experience with your audience, have a lasting impact, have an outcome on things?
That's a really good question. I would say that I think that it needs to become normalized to say that if you need help, here's help.
Right.
We have a stigma in our society where you're not allowed to ask for help, or you're not allowed to admit you have a problem, because that admits that you're a failure, which is totally just nonsense. Like, you're not a failure. Human beings, like, and again, I'm trying to get out there, like, in terms of people knowing what I know and, my research and all that. The truth is that human beings are really problematic. We're forget about we're not perfect. We're not even close to even like, we don't know anything. We're the dumbest species on this planet, which is weird because it's like we're so smart, but like, we don't really know anything. And all the smartest people have said that. Like Albert Einstein said, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know anything. And
Right.
Confucius said, the wise man knows he knows nothing. So when the smartest people are saying, I don't know anything, how do any of us have the arrogance to go, oh, I'm a genius? Like, and that's the problem is, and that's what I'm trying to work with on from the school system piece, is that we need to teach kids that you don't know anything, and that's being human. Like, that's normal. And the reason you're going to school is to learn more. And
Right.
so this idea of that we're lifelong learners, no duh. Like, we don't know anything. So unless you keep learning, you're going to be in the dark.
Right.
So when it comes to collecting, life experience never stops. So, okay, so you're a collector when you're a kid. And, a lot of people, left the hobby and came back during the pandemic. Okay, great. But now what's the collecting experience for you now as an adult, as a parent? What do you want to do with your kids? And so the perspective changes. Therefore, you have to change the way you think. And the problem is that we keep getting stuck in these mindsets. And that's the biggest issue. So if anything, hopefully people from my audience, from any audience, they just know the only thing you need to know is that Collectors MD exists.
Yep. I appreciate
that's
you saying
the
that.
Piece. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what this is all about. So this is a good segue for our next segment. We have 3 more segments. Usually we only do like 4 or 5. Honestly, there was so much to unpack with you today, Doc. I ended up doing 8. So we do have 3 more to cover. We'll try to get through them as quickly as we can, just because we're already at an hour and a half. If we go over the 2-hour mark, that's fine. But I would like to keep this episode to under 2 hours if possible. So the next segment is culture change from chase to meaning. So if you could redesign maybe the on-ramp, let's say for newcomers, what would they learn first? And what I mean by newcomers, like, are newcomers to the hobby space.
Yeah. I would say the best way for someone to get, well, I think there's 2 pieces to this, because there's a child piece, like, so a parent is actually bringing their kid into the hobby, and then there's someone who finds it on their own. So
Right.
let's do the parent-child piece first, and then we'll just talk about somebody on their own. So the best way for parents to get their kids into the hobby, whether that be TCG or sports, it's fine, whatever you want to do, is you should be really thinking about the bonding experience, because why else are you doing it? And it's not just personal to you. It's how you can help your child get closer to you, to what you are trying to teach them. Because I'm thinking you're trying to teach them about like what it was like for you. And like, this is a great way to have conversations without them being like uncomfortable. Like, most people probably never saw the movie City Slickers, but Billy Crystal has a line in that movie. The only time I could talk to my father was going to Yankee Stadium, because sports provided that buffer zone of, we could talk about difficult conversations as long as around sports. Well, the same thing with sports cards. So parents can have like hey, this is how you do this. So like you can teach interacting skills, you can teach social skills, you can teach negotiating skills, you can teach value, you can teach money, you can teach math. Like there's so many things you can teach with sports cards. So that would be the way I would get kids into it. And do not promote this is a 101, this is a rare card. Just talk about the players. Even go and get, I think commons is probably the best thing, the dollar bin for kids. And I've said this, like, parents, give your kid $10, have them go to a dealer and have them negotiate how many cards they can pull out of the dollar bin for $10 and see how many more than 10 can they get. And keep doing that. Go to card shows and go, here you go. You got $10. How many cards are you going to get this time? Because the ability to negotiate is going to last them for a lifetime. Like I got 10 cards for $10. Oh, I got 15 cards for $10. I got 20 cards for $10. Again, that's the piece, is getting value for the money. And if you teach your kids that lesson, again, this lasts for a lifetime. Now, for someone that comes into this on their own, like they see something on YouTube, they're like, ooh, that looks good. And usually the pathway in is that you can make money. The only reason that anybody on their own gets into this hobby is because they're like, ooh, this is a side hustle that I could do. So I would caution people, make a budget. Literally make a budget. Because the problem that you're having is unfortunately, you're seeing YouTube videos that have all been staged. They're all fake. None of these influencers actually sell cards. Even Chasing Cardboard, they sell cards, but they don't sell everything. And that's the problem, is they don't show you that they have, like Chasing Cardboard now actually has a problem, and he's alluded to it, but he doesn't actually show you. He now has like storage units filled with cards that he cannot sell. He is now in a hoarding situation, but he's a business, so it's not a hoarder. He just has inventory he can't get rid of. And that's why he's starting to partner with a bunch of different stores, because he doesn't know how to get rid of all of the stuff that's just not worth more than $5 or $10 each. And that's where people get themselves into trouble. So the on-ramp that I would say for somebody that's trying to get into this as a side hustle is make a budget and then go out and buy cards. Don't buy more cards. Don't try to load up on inventory. Make a budget, buy whatever you can, and then go and sell it. And then from whatever money you get back, and you will probably lose money, just telling you right now. So if you set a budget $500, you go out and you buy cards, you're probably going to make $400 back. So you're going to lose $100. But that's it. Don't put another 100 in. Now you got 400. Now go out and go buy again. Because if you learn how to lose money, you're going to learn how to make money. And that's probably the biggest thing is, so for collectors, unfortunately, I think you highlighted it. The hobby has changed. People don't collect to collect anymore. People collect, at least the new people collect to show off.
Right.
And that's not who I am. Like, that's not who people were back in the 80s and 90s. You didn't collect to show off because the cards weren't worth. What were you showing off? Like, here you go. I got a $5 card. I got a 30. Like, okay, why are you showing this to me? Well, no, there was, oh no, I am a Wade Boggs fan. I have Wade Boggs. Like, oh, okay. So like on Reddit, I see a lot of that, but it's all usually older collectors. And again, older is relative. But I would say over 35. Anybody under 35 is not really showing their cards. They're not, like, again, I have these, and here we go. Here's one that people probably, so this is way back in the day. Now, why do this Christopher Reeve, for me, his face is like my childhood. Like, I remember with my dad, I held his hand, we walked into the movie theater, and Superman was on this massive screen. Again, I was short. I was small. I was one of the smallest kids in my grade. And this was like larger than life. And you're like, wow, Superman. I mean, so for me, just seeing his face is like, wow, that's what I had when I was a kid. Again, that's the piece of collecting is, and collecting has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. In the Native American culture, they have something called totems. Like this is part of the human experience. Collecting is a good thing, but you can make it unhealthy. You can make it toxic. So let's just stay on the healthy side. There's nothing wrong with collecting stuff. As long as you understand like why you're collecting, you'll be fine.
Really well said. Yeah. It's all about guardrails, boundaries, self-limits, and actually holding yourself accountable to make sure that you're sticking to those parameters. Really well said, Doc. So we talked a little bit about the responsible ripping messaging and the collect with intention messaging that we're speaking with Jeff and his Cards HQ team about implementing. We're also actively having conversations with a handful of other breakers and card shops to start rolling out some of that messaging into the hobby environment, which I think is going to be pivotal as we continue to spread the word and get the message out there that Collectors MD exists, not solely so that they see it and say, oh, now I'm going to rip less packs, or now I'm going to collect with intention, but more so if they start to feel the pull of compulsion, of addiction, they have a safety net. They have a resource to go to, right? And that's Collectors MD. So what do you feel like shops and creators need to do as it pertains to things like responsible prompts and disclaimers? What could they add beyond what we've already talking about without killing the vibe altogether?
I think it's simple. And again, the hard part has already been done. Like you have done the hardest part, which is creating the support. The only thing that everybody in the hobby needs to do is just let people know. It's just about knowledge. So anything that card shops can do is just having a poster in the space, like with a QR code. Look, this is Collectors MD. If you think you might have a problem with card gambling, card addiction, or like it's a list of stuff, scan this QR code and join a meeting. I mean, that's it. Like they don't need to really do anything else. Just having those posters everywhere you go, like they should be wherever, like, so Walmart and Target, wherever those cards are, that little aisle, like in my Target, it's like a section because, again, they had to prevent people from trying to hurt people to get cards. So like in that section, they should just have a poster and there's a QR code. And so like, if you have, like, it's just, that's it. It's the hard part is already done. You've done the part that's like, how do we do this? You've done it. And so now it's just a matter of letting people know. And if they have a problem, they just get involved. And the card shop doesn't need to do anything. They don't need to explain anything. It's just, hey, there you go. Scan the QR code. You'll be fine. They know what they're doing. Just talk to them.
Yeah.
And that's it. And to be honest, that's a huge support.
Right. Yeah, what Doc is saying is basically that the call to action already exists. There's already a place to go. There's already a destination. We just need to create messaging to guide people there. And that messaging needs to appear in places like card shops and break platforms, places where these consumers are consuming their content. And that's so incredibly important. For those listening who may work at a card shop or be involved in a break group or know somebody who does, I highly encourage you to reach out to whoever you know and just tell them about Collectors MD. This isn't about, like, again, canceling the culture, canceling, breaks or collecting. This is about adding in layers of support so that we can help the hobby grow in a healthy and sustainable direction from here on forward. So it serves as a mutually beneficial component for everybody. this doesn't hurt anybody. It only helps the hobby.
Yeah, it's a
So
win.
again,
It's a win-win-win.
it's a win-win.
Which,
Yeah, because
which I
it
love.
also it protects the hobby from, you know, potential harm from outside governing bodies. Because if we can be proactive about the messaging, about creating these guardrails, then there's no reason for somebody to step in and say, hey, you guys are exploiting children. You guys are lying to your customers. You guys are doing this, that, the other. We want to serve as an ally. And so that's a good segue again for the next segment, which is allies, advocacy, and scaling support. So Collectors MD was built as a safe space, but the need is far bigger than me alone. We alluded to that earlier. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of individuals struggling across multiple hobbies, not just the sports card hobby. And when we, you know, take a step back and look at the big picture, the actual size and scale of all of these different scopes of collecting or spending, the number may even stagger into the millions, to be honest. So what role do you think, Doc, can allies play? You know, folks like content creators, influencers, even corporations like Fanatics, you know, as far as helping advocate for change?
Well, I think the piece, we agree on the fact that the hobby is amazing. The hobby can be a lot of fun, and so this is not about getting people out of the hobby and telling people don't get into the hobby. So I think that's the first message, is that this is about just making it fun. Like, how do you collect and how do you buy cards that is fun and healthy and that it's sustainable? You know, from a ally standpoint, I would hope that those people care about those messages. But again, I don't know. I don't know them. You can only hope for the best. In terms of content creators, I think that what Collectors MD is going to, I guess, run up against, and this is sort of the question mark. I think it's a huge positive that Jeff Wilson brought you on his show, because I think it shows a little bit of character on his behalf. I honestly, the impression that I got from all of his previous content is that he's a narcissist who doesn't care about anybody. And bringing you on his show really shattered that. Like, you can't be a narcissist and then bring Collectors MD on when no one knows who the hell you are. Like, that was a huge, like, it kind of made me go, all right, maybe I don't really know who this guy is, which is also saying something on social media. You don't know who these people are. This is a show, and they're giving you a projection, and none of it is who they really are. And so I think the issue becomes that some of these influencers have created characters that may not align with Collectors MD. It may not be that they don't care, and it may not be that they don't want to help, but their character on their social media channel just can't get involved in being good. They're villains, which is why they're popular. And so because they're villains, it's sort of like we've created in this hobby, like we're LARPing WWE. So there's heroes and there's villains. And if you're on the villain side, Collectors MD is the enemy. Whereas if you're on the hero side, Collectors MD is the knight in shining armor. So I didn't realize what I was doing, but I'm on the hero side. Like, I'm on the collecting is great and all of this. So for me, Collectors MD is amazing. It's a win-win-win. But that's because I'm on the hero side. Again, for anybody that's watching, you have to realize that that's what's going on social media. My channel is a counterpoint to all the influencers. I only talk about real. I only talk about truth. I only talk about fact. I only talk about honesty. And the honesty is that there's problems. I don't go down the rabbit hole of like, well, it's all problems. It's all like, it's not all negative. No. In life, there's yin and yang, and there's problems, and there's good things. And so my channel is all about honesty. Collectors MD is just about support, which is why it works, because it's so singularly focused. It's not focused on trying to solve world problems. It's just, if you have this issue, here's where you go. And there is a susceptibility in this hobby for this problem to exist. Therefore, this can also be a preventative measure for people. Again, what you've done, when I saw it on Jeff Wilson's show, it was like an inflection point. Like, oh, wow, okay, that's big. And that's why I reached out, because what you've done is not small. This is big. This is bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us. It is the existential threat to the hobby. And if Fanatics doesn't understand that, then they're very short-sighted. I will tell you right now, what you're doing, what people who go to Collectors MD are dealing with, is going to happen to someone who has great power and influence in our country. And once that happens, this hobby is going to get torched by the regulators. They're going to go scorched earth on them because it's cards. And no one has any respect outside the hobby for the cards. Yeah. They're like, you guys are crazy. And remember, this is 95, 98% men, which also in our society is not looking good for us. So if you really want the regulators to come after us, don't promote Collectors MD. This is actually the stopgap measure. This does protect the hobby in a way that I think most people just don't realize.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a proactive safeguard. Yeah. Those are some really, really valid points. And I agree. I think that if we wait, it's only a matter of time before something like that happens. And if there's no infrastructure in place when that government body comes knocking on the door, it's game over for everyone.
Well, look at the Shohei Ohtani, and I forgot his interpreter's name, but yeah. I mean, look at that situation. Okay, right. So the feds get involved. It was like $6 million or $8 million of gambling debt. Like, and Shohei Ohtani is the biggest star in the world.
Right.
And Major League Baseball had a real problem on their hands because Congress is just waiting for an excuse to strip them of their antitrust status. They're waiting. They're like, we just need a good reason to make you guys like every other sports franchise league in the world. So look, we've given you a privilege you don't deserve. Go ahead, test us. And so the sports card industry is kind of in that same, like, we're growing, again, not to the level that Fanatics wants us to grow, but we're growing. And with more eyeballs and with all of these people getting attention, and Tom Brady is a big deal. And again, now with 2026, so Fanatics is going to have all the licenses, which means they're going to double down on all the advertising, and they're going to advertise in the ballparks, which means it's all going to be targeted against kids. And when I say against, I mean that specifically. They're targeting against kids because they don't care about your children. They don't care about the dopamine hit. They don't care. They're only trying to make money. So you have to do what you need to do to protect your children. And for adults, this is the, like, if you get into trouble, here you go. You can use this. But kids can't do these things. So parents need to know about this so that you get the resources from Collectors MD, get that guide, and go, what are the things that I need to be aware of with my children? Because children can't be in on the sessions. So like, oh, okay, I just need to be careful on this, like, oh, I get it. And it's not hard. That's the piece that I hopefully people get. The solution is simple. That's why it's going to work, because if the solution was hard, so no, you've done a great job making it simple to actually deal with the problem, which means that it can be done.
Right. Yeah. And for those that are coming in and, watching this video and saying, well, how are you guys going to reach the masses? This video only has 50, 100 views. You only have 70, 80, 90 subscribers. And, we have a modest following. We understand. We know that. We have around 1,500 followers on Instagram. We reach our audience across other social platforms like X and TikTok and YouTube, Mantle. We have Discord, Reddit, etc. But at the end of the day, success isn't measured in clout, in metrics. It's measured in impact. And we're creating an impact by reaching the masses in other ways, whether it be a community conversation with somebody from the hobby or from the industry, or having a weekly peer support meeting where 40 people show up and we're impacting dozens of people right then and there. I just want to take a moment here because you brought up a lot of really good points, and I think a lot of people will see this or listen to this and say, well, this is all great, but like Collectors MD still has a ways to go. Yes, we absolutely have a ways to go, but in just a little over 6 months, we've been able to, like you said, Doc, build the foundation, and that's what's so incredibly important. So I do want to just mention, like, our long-term vision here is, looking at Collectors MD as potentially franchising or expanding. Like, again, right now it's small, it's grassroots, we're only 6 months in, but the demand is massive. And it's not just sports cards, it's sneakers, TCG, NFTs, luxury goods, retail, therapy, all these things. People in all these spaces are dealing with the same dopamine loops and the same cycle of overspending. So just imagine for a moment chapters across states, across countries, even across these different hobbies, local groups that meet in person, peer support meetings tailored to their community, and then all connected under one larger umbrella, which is Collectors MD. The messaging here would be consistent, which is collect with intention, not compulsion, but the delivery could reflect the culture of each place or hobby. We could tailor it accordingly. That's how this becomes universal. It's not about one person running everything and trying to go viral or become famous on the internet. Like, that's not my plan here. It's about building a framework that others can adapt, and lead within their own communities. And to me, that's the future of Collectors MD, to making it accessible, scalable, and rooted in helping people everywhere, which again is why we're having these conversations with organizations like the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado at the state level, so they can take our infrastructure, our framework, and adapt it to what already exists. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that I'm glad that you gave that as the vision, because it's important. Like, so one of the things that I teach is 21st century skills, and most people don't even know what that means. And so I'll just give you guys some like behind the scenes stuff. So there was a research study in 2020 from Georgetown University, which asked the question, what are the skills that 21st century people need in order to not just survive, but thrive? Like, how do you actually make more money? How do you build generational wealth and all this? And so what they found was there's 5 skills across the board that you need to know. And one of them is 21st century leadership skills. Now, I did the research. I started way back before 2020. So I actually was researching this back in 2009. And so what I did was I broke out what leadership skills meant. And there's 6 fundamentals. The first one is vision. What you just did is so critical, because if you don't know where you're going, then how can you follow? And
Right.
Leaders need to set a path so that people can walk down that path. You've done that. For anybody that's also going, well, but you don't have like this and you don't have that. Again, the point is, what's the purpose of the group? And the purpose is to help people. Therefore, it doesn't matter how big it is. It's doing its mission. And by helping one person at a time, it's going to grow.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to help it grow, I also have done all the research on social media virality and the science of virality and all that. The only way that this grows at an exponential rate is if everyone that already understands, so all of the people who are following this, like if you're already in Collectors MD, then all that Alex needs to do is tell you on X date at X time, you all need to share the same media content. because if it's done at the same time, that creates what's called a trend. And so that's it. That's all that. So if he wanted to, and again, I think that our interview was a little bit better than the interview with Jeff Wilson, because he's not a professional interviewer. So it kind of, it meandered all over the place. Whereas our interview is very tight. It's like, here you go. It's a half hour of this is Collectors MD. So I would say that one of the pieces of media that you should share, again, it has to be at the same time and the same day. If you do that, it creates a trend, but everybody should share that video once within whatever social media content strategy. And if you start creating, again, posts and whatnot that people can share at a specific time and date, that will actually exponentially grow the Collectors MD social media presence, and it will grow faster than it's growing now because you've already done all the great work.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. I do want to just quickly call out today's daily reflection, which talked about Mr. Beast in this video that he posted. It was a time capsule where he had 8,000 subscribers 10 years ago. Fast forward to today, he has over 550 million YouTube subscribers across many channels. He does a lot of really incredible things. He gives back. He does charity. It's all amazing. But I think what people lose sight of with something like this is that looking at somebody like Mr. Beast is like looking up at a vertical mountain. I'm inspired to help people. I'm inspired to give back, but I don't have a platform or a foundation. And how am I going to start in today's ultra competitive landscape, right? And so we talk here about how success isn't defined solely by clout, metrics, or money. It's about impact. And that's what I just brought up earlier. And so again, that's exactly what we see with Collectors MD. Just a little over 6 months in, we're still small, we're still modest, we're still growing. And we know there are thousands more collectors out there struggling who need support and who we're committed to reach. But the fact that we've already impacted dozens, if not hundreds of people is incredible, something we're very proud of. It proves that even without massive clout or huge numbers, meaningful change is possible. Every reflection read, every meeting join, every message exchange in our community is proof that success isn't just about scale, it's about the lives touched along the way. So I think this is a really important message, especially for those listening who want to, make an impact and help others or create on their own, or maybe even have a career in social media. It's possible to do these things. You don't necessarily have to have a huge following to make an impact on other people. And that's what I've learned in the 6 months that I've started Collectors MD. It's amazing what, the power of media, the power of technology can do if you leverage it for the right things. So, Doc, we're coming up on our last segment here.
Let me just make one final point on that piece, because this is, I think this also connects with Collectors MD. I think, again, it goes back to that mountain that you were talking about. So the overwhelmed feeling, the feeling of being stuck. And this is the problem with addiction and mental illness. And it's like, you want to be better. You're like, I know I have a problem and I want to be better. The issue is that it's not going to take a day. Like, being better means wanting to be better. And that is a win. So if you're thinking about, like, I don't know, I have a problem, I'm spending too much money, I'm hiding, like you said, hiding these things from loved ones, and I'm in isolation and shame, I don't know what to do, and it just seems so overwhelming. Honestly, just admitting that is a win. The second thing you should do is just join Collectors MD. That's it. If you do that, you're 100% better than you were 2 days ago. Literally. So it's not as big a mountain as you think it is. It's just that you're not looking at the right path. You're going, how do I fix this problem? And it's like, no, it's not about fixing the problem. It's about, what should I do? What's a better decision to make? And it's a better decision to say, I have a problem. And then 2, just join Collectors MD. And that's the purpose of the mission. And it will grow if everyone just does that. It's not about how many social media followers, because that's not the mission. Your mission isn't to have 1 million followers. Your mission is to help people.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I know everybody that's in it gets it. So everybody that's listening, just understand that the mission of Collectors MD is to help. Therefore, there is no number that matters. If they help, that's the mission. That's it.
Yeah. Well said. So we are up to our last segment here. We're basically going to close out and provide some practical advice. So we talk a lot about sort of these like red flags that come up when somebody that you might be close to, whether that be a child or a spouse or a parent or a sibling or a friend, might be crossing from something like collecting into compulsion, right? And I'll give you a few examples. For instance, the constantly, sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought. Always being on your device. If somebody is just constantly on their device and they're isolating themselves in the corner and they're, not engaging, that's generally a red flag. If they're being defensive or combative when things like finances or, questions about spending pop up, that's generally a red flag, right? When they're hiding packages or, justifying purchases or not showing up to plans, something like a planned event, a birthday party, a wedding, an engagement. I mean, these are things that people will literally skip just to make sure that they can join their break or that they can scratch that itch. Those are all red flags. Are there any other red flags, Doc, that you see within sort of this space that people should look out for?
Well, I think you're giving really good examples. And I think that there's a ton of examples. I think the bigger thing for people to be aware of is that if you don't know about these things, my suggestion is do a Google search on symptoms of depression, because they're very aligned. Like, so separating, isolating, shame, like all of these things are very similar. So if you're trying to go, well, how do I know? Just Google search symptoms of depression. And if you see anything like that, then okay, you may not know it's like gambling or whatever, but it looks very similar. Yeah. So that will help. The biggest thing that I would say for anybody, and anybody that has a loved one or a friend or somebody that they're like, I think they might have a problem. There's a tendency to be like, well, I don't want to invade on their space. I don't want to violate their privacy. I want to get their consent to help. And I would say that, yes, you obviously you can't help someone who doesn't want help. I learned that the hard way in education, because when you're in like when I was a teacher, a principal or superintendent, my job is to help people learn. That's my job. The problem is that not everybody is ready to learn, and you can't force someone to do something. It's just, you can't do that. So how do you get through to someone who may be having a problem? And so this is my advice. Again, I'm not a psychologist, but this is based on my 25 years of experience. The first piece that you have to do is set a runway for openness and honesty, as well as respect. And so if you go in with, hey, I really appreciate you, and I think you're great, and this is why I'm thankful for our friendship, relationship, or our, like if you're a relative, like if it's your kid, like, hey, I really love you. You're really great. And if you ever feel like that you're not as good as you think you are, I hope you'll come and talk to me. Again, you don't have to address the situation exactly. You just need to allow the space for communication. because that's the thing that breaks down. That's the first thing that breaks down. There's no more communication. And once that happens, once you break communication, that's where the isolation and all the problems start.
Right.
So it's really about, that's why what Collectors MD is so important, because it's reforming communication lines. People actually have to say, hey, I bought some cards. And it's like, yeah, you did. Like that's the beginning. If you don't communicate, you only get yourself into trouble. So the more you communicate, the better off you are. And so that's really the biggest thing that I would say is just make sure. And even if you think like, oh, I have great communication with everybody, let's put it this way, double it. And then you'll see how much communication you have. So even if you think you're the greatest communicator in the world, double the amount of communication you have. And then you'll see, oh, okay, there was room for more.
Yeah, communication is key. Yeah, and if you are, doing the first suggestion that Doc offered, and you're researching depression, symptoms of depression, anxiety, anything mental health related, it is very important to, and this is just a minor disclaimer, not to self-diagnose or assume that you have some sort of mental disorder based on what you read on the internet. Seek professional help. And we have professional help available. Right Choice Recovery is one option. Birch's Health is another. We have, a handful of individual therapists, doctors, clinicians who can offer support on a one-on-one basis. If you need help, please seek it. Don't just read, webmd.com and just assume that you have, some sort of disorder or mental illness, because that's where people start to, really get themselves in trouble.
Yeah, no, that's honestly, I'm gonna repeat what you said.
I know it was implied.
Just to make sure that communication is there. So when the beauty of the internet is that you can be aware of things, but even if you're a trained professional, even if you're a psychologist, then it is unethical to self-diagnose. So just so everybody understands, it's unethical to self-diagnose. So if you are not a trained professional and you're doing something wrong. The point of looking any of these things up is because you're trying to know, do I have a problem, and may it be psychologically tied? And then if you see, we're like, hey, I have some things on this list, then absolutely reach out to a professional to get a professional diagnosis. And it may turn out to be, no, you don't have a problem. You're just, you're just not feeling well. Like that's it. And maybe some things happen, like, okay, but you don't have an actual diagnosis. Right. Don't self-diagnose. It's unethical. You shouldn't do that because you're never going to know. The problem with human beings is that we don't know what we're doing. Only other people can look from the outside and go, did you know you did this? And I don't know if how many people are self-aware. I'm a very self-aware person. So I know what my limitations are on what I can actually perceive as to what is going on. And I have to always ask, which is where the communication comes in. I go, so when I gave that speech, like, what did you hear? What did you see? Like, what was my body language like? And I get that feedback because people go, well, you seemed a little nervous, or you seemed, and I'm like, okay. Because I cannot know what I'm doing. I can only be me. And therefore the same thing with you. You don't know. You may think no one knows there's anything wrong, but you would be wrong about that. I bet people definitely know, but they're afraid to come to you because you look like you're in pain and they don't want to bother you.
Yeah. Well said, Doc. And for those listening, we are currently showing our Collectors MD referral network, which you could find at collectorsmd.com/get-help. At any time you need, it's available. We have Right Choice Recovery, Birch's Health, Taya Kim, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. We have Dr. Rick Shaw, who is a doctor. Of course, Gamban as another resource if you need self-exclusion tools to block access to thousands of high-risk apps, including Whatnot, Fanatics Live, eBay, etc. So this is all available for you if you need it. This is a growing network. We're actually going to be announcing several more individuals and organizations in the coming weeks. So be on the lookout for that. We also post all of our news on news and announcements within Collectors MD. So things like our partnership with Card Ladder, of course, anything related to our referral network. We also post our giveaways on here, things like that. So with that being said, we're going to transition over to the rapid fire round. And I'm going to preface by saying, Doc, oh, I removed you by mistake. I apologize for that. Click the wrong button. We're good. I'm going to preface by saying, Doc, that this is a rapid fire round, so only short answers. I know you're very, very good at expanding on your thoughts and articulating your ideas, and I'm super grateful for that. And we've created some incredible content over the last couple hours. But this is the rapid fire round. So first thing that comes to mind, and that's it. There's seven questions here. We're gonna move through them quickly. You ready?
You got it.
Awesome. Favorite card in your PC right now?
It would be that card, the Jacob deGrom auto. There we go.
From his Mets days, I assume.
Yeah.
Rookie card.
The Simply Supreme.
If he didn't get hurt, I mean, he had a great year, but if he didn't get hurt, he would have been one of the best pitchers of all time. I mean, he would have followed the Sandy Koufax route. Because he's not going to pitch long enough to have the stats. Yeah.
But he was that dominant in such a short amount of he's unreal. Like his stuff is unreal.
Yeah. deGrom was awesome. One non-card collectible that teaches the same lessons.
I'm not sure what lessons we're teaching. So I think any collecting teaches the same lessons. So
yeah, I apologize. I sort of phrased that. I kind of was incomplete, or I thought it would be implied. But one non-card collectible that I guess would fall into the same category that we've been talking about. I mean, I mentioned dozens of them, but
I think anything.
Resembles most closely.
I'll put it this way: my whole background is so you could over collect, and you could get into too many pennants. You can get too many basketballs. You can get too many Steins. You can get too many bobbleheads. Like, I mean, my background is like, this is why I'm a son of a hoarder. Like, I have everything. So. Yeah, like any one thing could always turn negative. Like it can always get out of hand. Yeah. Like even books. Like there are people who get addicted to books. So it can go in any direction. And so like it's not the thing, it's the human behavior. Right. And that's the piece.
That's the point. One thing you'd regulate tomorrow if you could.
I would regulate the gambling targeting of children. That's the only thing that concerns me.
I figured you'd say that, but just figured we touch on it one more time. A mantra or reminder you use to stay grounded.
That's a good question. Enjoy the cards.
Love it. A message to a collector hiding packages and or lying to their loved ones about their spending.
It's not your fault. Just open up.
Love it. One mindset shift you'd want every collector to hear.
Stop chasing approval.
Love it. And then lastly, why community and not secrecy and isolation is the best antidote.
Because without other people, like nothing's fun. Like, the whole point of life is community. It's relationships. It's other people. We're built as a social society. So that's what human beings are. That's why social media works the way it does, because we like to interact with each other. So the less you interact, the less human you become.
Right. And as it pertains to recovery and support, as we always say, we cannot heal alone. We have to heal in group. We have to rely on those around us in order to get through tough times. And that's why community within the Collectors MD lens, or through the Collectors MD lens, is so important, impactful, and just part of everything that we do. So with that, Doc, thank you so much for bringing both honesty and urgency to this conversation. The hobby, the collecting as a whole, needs voices like yours to spark these changes. For everyone listening, you can find Doc at ediSportscards on both YouTube and Instagram. If you haven't already, we encourage you to check out the conversation that we had on Doc's YouTube channel last month. It was much shorter, but also very impactful. And we talked about a lot of really important things on there. The title is "What Happens When Your Collecting Turns into an Addiction," and basically a 40-minute interview with Doc and myself. And as always, if you or someone you know is struggling with compulsive collecting or overspending, you're welcome to join our Collectors MD peer support meetings every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. They are free, they're confidential, and they're open to anyone. All you have to do is fill out the Google form in the description of this episode, and you'll get added to the next virtual meeting. You can also check out past episodes of The Collector's Compass, along with our other shows, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD Features, now streaming on all major platforms. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, remember, collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you soon.